My fiancée lied about her debt while I paid all household bills, so I ended our engagement quietly and took every asset she depended on. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and for years, I thought my fiancée, Hannah, and I were building a secure, happy life together. Every Saturday, we'd sit on our worn couch, balancing bills, splitting groceries, and arguing over furniture choices with an ease that felt normal, like this was the life we both wanted. I remember the smell of fresh coffee on the counter as she typed out her work emails while I scribbled numbers into a notebook, making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. She always looked up from her laptop with a smile, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and said, "I don't know how you do it, babe. I'm so lucky you handle this while I focus on my career." Those words used to make me feel proud, even as I stayed up late doing extra shifts, skipping dinners with friends, or ignoring my own little indulgences just to keep the bills paid on time. I can still see the pile of invoices on the kitchen counter, the electricity, the internet, the insurance, and how I meticulously labeled each one, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction that I was keeping us afloat. But, slowly, little things started gnawing at me. A charge here I didn't recognize, an unexplained credit card fee there, sometimes a vague excuse about work stuff or just one of those things. And the texts, oh, those evasive little texts, where she'd reply a day later with a shrug of explanation that didn't make sense. At first, I brushed it all off. Maybe she was stressed, I told myself, or maybe I was just overthinking. Still, I couldn't shake the quiet weight in my chest, that nagging sense that my dedication, my endless late nights and extra work, might be building something fragile instead of stable. I thought I was protecting our future, but I had no idea how fragile that foundation really was. Things started to feel off. I'd glance at our joint bank account and notice transactions I didn't recognize, small, almost laughable amounts at first, like $47 here, $82 there, but the pattern was unsettling. "Hannah, who bought this?" I asked one evening, pointing at a digital receipt for some online store I'd never heard of. She looked up from her phone, biting her lip, and said, "Oh, that's nothing, just some work supplies. I'll pay you back." Her voice was light, casual, but the tension in her eyes made my stomach twist. I tried to let it go, convincing myself I was being paranoid, but the uneasy feeling refused to leave. Then came the calls. Debt collectors asking about accounts I'd never opened. Letters arrived addressed to her, or both of us, but mentioning sums I couldn't comprehend. When I asked, she shrugged and said, "It's just old bills. I've got it handled." Except it didn't feel handled, not at all. The late-night texts became more frequent, vague excuses piling up like bricks on my chest, and each one left me feeling smaller, like I was failing at the one thing I thought I could control, keeping us financially afloat. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, the hum of the air conditioner above us, feeling the quiet weight of everything pressing down. I ran my hands over my face, trying to make sense of it all. How could someone I loved, someone I trusted, be keeping secrets that could unravel everything we'd built together? I wanted to confront her, to demand the truth, but something in her tone, her practiced casualness, made me hesitate. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, a whisper of doubt had settled in. And it was growing louder. I had no idea just how deep this rabbit hole went. I started noticing a pattern in the way Hannah responded whenever I brought up money. It wasn't just defensiveness anymore, it was a calculated guilt, a slow, quiet push that made me question myself. "I can't believe you're acting like this," she said one night, sitting cross-legged on the couch, her voice soft but edged with accusation. "I'm stressed, I'm trying, and you're making me feel worse." I froze, feeling the weight of responsibility slam into me. Suddenly, I wasn't angry, I felt bad for her, like I'd done something wrong just by asking questions. The room smelled faintly of her vanilla candle, the dim light of the lamp casting shadows across her face, making her seem smaller, vulnerable, and somehow untouchable. Every month, small expenses started piling up, new subscriptions I hadn't approved, meals we never ate together, random purchases she forgot to mention. When I questioned them, she smiled, brushed it off, and said, "I'll balance it next time, I promise." I tried to believe her. I really did. But inside, the unease gnawed at me like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. I felt trapped in this cycle, my generosity weaponized, my trust exploited, but I didn't know how to break it without destroying everything we'd built, or at least what I thought we'd built. Friends started noticing subtle changes too. "You look exhausted, man. Are you okay?" one asked over dinner. I laughed it off, hiding the weight of all those late nights, the extra gigs, the constant vigilance over bills. But even their concern didn't reach the truth of what I was feeling. I began to realize this wasn't just stress or bad budgeting. There was something else, something deeper, something she was hiding, and it was waiting for me to uncover. I didn't know it yet, but this quiet manipulation was just the beginning. And the cracks in our life together were about to grow wider than I ever imagined. By this point, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me like a storm I couldn't escape. I was working extra hours, skipping lunches, and even passing up nights out with friends just to make sure every bill was covered. Hannah seemed oblivious, lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, occasionally tossing me a tired smile that somehow made me feel guilty for being tired myself. "Don't worry about it, babe. You always handle things so well," she said one evening, sipping wine in our dimly lit kitchen. Her words should have been comforting, but they felt like chains, binding me to a role I hadn't asked for. I started keeping my own records, tracking every transaction, every little expense, everything she didn't mention. The numbers were staggering, small amounts turned into hundreds, hundreds into thousands. And yet, she never noticed, or if she did, she never cared. I remember lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside, feeling exhausted and trapped in silence. The air smelled faintly of leftover takeout, and I realized how much I'd sacrificed for a life that was slowly slipping out of my hands. Each confrontation became a delicate dance. I'd ask a question, she'd answer vaguely, I'd nod, forcing myself to believe her. The emotional labor was suffocating. The quiet resentment inside me was building, simmering beneath the surface, and every unreturned call, every delayed explanation, every evasive text pushed me closer to a breaking point. I knew something had to change, but I didn't know how. And I had no idea that the real betrayal, the one that would shatter everything, was still waiting, just around the corner, ready to hit when I least expected it. It started with the letters. Thick envelopes with my name and hers scrawled across the front, arriving in the mailbox like tiny harbingers of doom. Debt collectors, overdue notices, unfamiliar accounts, I'd never opened any of them. I set them on the kitchen counter, my hands shaking slightly as I stacked them neatly, and waited for her to notice. "Hannah, what's all this?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. She looked up from her laptop, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "It's nothing. I told you, it's just old bills," she said quickly, avoiding my gaze. But it wasn't nothing. I could feel the weight of every hidden transaction pressing against my chest, suffocating me with the realization that I'd been carrying her debts along with ours all this time. Each unexplained charge, each evasive answer, felt like another lie layered on top of the last. I remember the hum of the ceiling fan above, the dim light of the room washing over the piles of unopened statements. Her casualness was infuriating, as if these financial disasters were mere inconveniences, not the foundation of the life we were supposed to be building together. When I tried to talk to her, she'd deflect, charm me, or sometimes cry, twisting my concern into guilt. "You don't trust me, do you?" she asked one night, tears welling in her eyes, but her credit card statements told a different story. I started to feel trapped in a cycle, my generosity being used as a cushion for her lies. The quiet resentment that had been simmering in me for months now roared, filling every corner of our apartment with tension. And in that moment, sitting there surrounded by evidence I could no longer ignore, I realized this was no small mistake or harmless oversight. The betrayal was real, and it was far bigger than I had ever imagined. Little did I know, the moment that would shatter everything completely, and force me to face the truth, was right around the corner. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who snoops, but that night, I found myself going through our shared accounts, receipts, and statements with a sinking feeling in my chest. That's when I saw it, the full scope of Hannah's hidden debt. Credit cards maxed out, personal loans I'd never known about, late fees, interest piling higher than I could comprehend. My hands trembled as I scrolled through document after document, each one a confirmation that every dollar I had been sacrificing was covering her lies. I confronted her gently, trying to give her a chance to explain. "Hannah, why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice shaking but controlled. She blinked, smiled nervously, and said, I thought I could fix it before you noticed. I didn't want to stress you." Her words hit me like a slap. Fix it? She had been hiding thousands of dollars in debt, relying entirely on me to keep the house running while she lived as if nothing were wrong. I felt my stomach drop, a mix of rage and heartbreak twisting together. The air smelled faintly of takeout from earlier that evening, the hum of the refrigerator louder than usual, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath. Every little excuse she had ever given me, the late nights, the vague bills, the evasive texts, now made sense in a devastatingly clear pattern. I realized I had been duped, manipulated by someone I trusted most, and the life I thought we were building was nothing but an illusion. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. My sacrifices, my long hours, my late nights, had all been feeding a lie. And as I stared at the numbers on the screen, a cold, hard resolve began to form in me. I had to take control. I had to protect what was mine. What I didn't know yet was just how far I would go, and just how much she had counted on me to stay blind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on our bed, staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of streetlights spilling through the blinds, feeling the full weight of betrayal crush me. I kept replaying every late-night shift, every skipped dinner, every extra gig I had taken on to keep our bills paid while she racked up her secret debts. My chest felt heavy, tight, as if all the air had been squeezed out of me, and I realized I'd been living in someone else's illusion while my own life was being stolen piece by piece. When I tried to talk to her, the conversation went like this, I don't get it, Hannah. Why didn't you tell me about any of this? I asked quietly, voice trembling. She looked at me, eyes wide, and said, I thought you'd hate me. I didn't want to lose you. But the truth was, I already hated what she'd done, not her, not fully, but the betrayal itself, the way it had quietly infiltrated every corner of my life. I felt hollow, exhausted, and defeated. Even sitting in our kitchen later, hearing the faint buzz of the refrigerator, seeing her move around casually like nothing had happened, made me feel smaller, like the world had shifted and left me behind. The house we shared felt suffocating, every familiar smell, every soft hum of electricity reminding me that I had been blind for too long. Friends called, asking if I was okay, and I lied, muttering that I was just tired, that work had been rough. I didn't tell anyone that my trust had been weaponized, my sacrifices turned into leverage, my life quietly taken apart. And in that darkness, a thought began to flicker, one I had buried deep until now, maybe this wasn't just about betrayal. Maybe this was the moment I could stop being the person who always forgives, always sacrifices, always trusts. But I had no idea how far I would have to go, or how much I'd have to lose before I could reclaim control. After that night, I stopped confronting Hannah outright. Instead, I started observing, quietly, methodically, tracking every expense, every vague explanation, every evasive glance. I kept a ledger on my laptop, noting every bill, every text, every tiny lie that I had previously brushed off. Even when she smiled at me across the table, I felt a flicker of suspicion. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the kitchen, even the creak of the floorboards under her steps, all of it felt like subtle reminders that nothing was as it seemed. I watched how she handled money, how she avoided discussions about large purchases, how she flinched at my casual questions. It was infuriating, but also empowering in a strange way. I finally had the proof, the evidence of deception that had eluded me for months. She remained unaware of my observations, blissfully ignorant of the fact that I was quietly reclaiming control over the situation. Every evasive answer, every shrug, every half-truth was being catalogued. At the same time, I worked extra hours, kept the household running, and maintained the facade of normalcy. Friends would call, "You seem different, man. Are you okay?" I would laugh, shrug, and lie, "Yeah, just tired from work." They had no idea the mental chess I was playing behind the scenes, gathering pieces for a confrontation that wasn't yet ready to happen. Sitting alone in our apartment one evening, the faint glow of the city outside the window casting long shadows across the floor, I realized something chilling. I had the upper hand. I had knowledge, patience, and leverage she didn't even know existed. And I started to understand that the quiet, calculated approach, rather than anger, shouting, or confrontation, might be the only way to reclaim everything she had relied on me for. But I also knew one thing: when the time came, the fallout would be nothing short of catastrophic for her. By now, I knew I couldn't confront Hannah without a plan. I needed precision, control, and a way to protect myself while reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I started mapping out every joint account, every shared asset, every little thing she had relied on me for, my paychecks, our savings, even the furniture I had worked overtime to buy. I consulted a lawyer discreetly, asking questions without revealing my full intentions, making sure everything I planned was airtight. Late at night, I would sit at the dining table, receipts and spreadsheets spread across the surface, sipping black coffee, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the apartment like a quiet accomplice. I imagined every possible reaction she might have, every manipulation she could throw at me, and I meticulously crafted ways to stay several steps ahead. My anger had cooled into a cold, methodical resolve. I wasn't going to let emotion dictate the outcome. Hannah still moved around the apartment oblivious, humming to herself while texting or scrolling through her phone. I could feel the irony. She thought she had me trapped, while in reality, I was quietly reclaiming control of the situation. Each decision, each small step, was a piece of a puzzle I was putting together with surgical precision. I also began mentally detaching from her, the person I thought I loved. I knew this wasn't just about money, it was about respect, honesty, and reclaiming my life from someone who had systematically hidden the truth from me. And as I finalized the last few details of my plan, a chilling sense of anticipation settled over me. I knew the moment I would act was approaching, and when it did, the consequences would be swift, absolute, and irreversible. The night I confronted Hannah, I remember every detail: the soft flicker of the lamp casting long shadows across the living room, the faint smell of takeout we'd left earlier, the distant hum of traffic outside. I sat across from her, calm but resolute, letting the silence stretch between us before speaking. "Hannah. I know about the debt. I know about everything you've been hiding," I said quietly, watching her eyes widen in a mixture of shock and panic. She tried to laugh it off at first, a nervous, high-pitched giggle. You don't understand. I was going to fix it. I didn't want to stress you." I shook my head, letting the weight of my gaze speak louder than words. "Fix it? You've been hiding thousands, letting me carry the burden while pretending everything was fine. This engagement is over." Her mouth opened and closed, searching for an excuse, but none came. The room felt suffocating, every familiar sound amplified, the ticking of the clock, the faint rustle of her papers, her shallow breaths. She tried the tears, the pleading, the manipulation I had endured for months, but this time it didn't work. I outlined calmly, step by step, what I had discovered, and how I had prepared to protect myself legally and financially. Her eyes widened with a mix of fear and disbelief as she realized I had anticipated every possible argument, every manipulation tactic she could throw at me. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just laid it out with quiet certainty. Control was back in my hands. By the time I finished, the apartment felt different, almost empty, despite her presence. She sat there, stunned, as if she had been stripped of some invisible power she had relied on for so long. And in that moment, I knew, the scales had finally tipped. But this confrontation was just the beginning of reclaiming everything she had depended on me for. After that confrontation, I moved quietly but decisively. I accessed joint accounts, secured funds I had earned and contributed, and made sure every shared asset was legally under my control. Furniture, electronics, even the small things she had come to rely on, everything was accounted for. I did it methodically, deliberately, making sure there was no way she could dispute what had been rightfully mine. Each action felt like peeling away layers of the betrayal, reclaiming not just money, but my sense of self-respect, my power, my life. Hannah scrambled, of course. Calls, texts, tearful messages begging me to reconsider, promises to repay, pleas that sounded eerily familiar from months before. But this time, I wasn't swayed. Every move I made was backed by documentation, evidence, and careful planning. There was no room for manipulation, no cracks for guilt to seep through. I watched as the realization hit her face, she had lost control, and I wasn't giving it back. The apartment, once filled with tension and secrets, suddenly felt quieter. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, even the faint smell of coffee brewing in the morning, it all felt like mine again. Each step I took through the space reminded me that I had survived, that I had reclaimed what I had built with my own hands. Friends and family slowly began to notice the change too. My composure, my confidence, the quiet strength I now carried, it was different, tangible, impossible to ignore. And deep down, I felt a calm satisfaction, a quiet sense of justice. The worst of it was over. Or at least, I thought it was. But one final step remained, the last piece of closure I needed to truly move forward. Months later, I sit in my apartment, the space finally feeling like mine. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards, the smell of morning coffee, it all carries a quiet sense of ownership, of peace I hadn't known for years. Hannah's messages have stopped, calls unanswered, her attempts to reach me ignored. And that silence, it's strangely satisfying. I don't need confrontation anymore, the quiet, calculated steps I took were more powerful than any argument could have been. I had reclaimed my life, my assets, my dignity. I reflect on all the late nights, the sacrifices, the exhaustion, and the manipulation I endured. Every moment built toward this, a life where I am in control, where my trust is no longer a weapon against me. Friends notice the difference too. They comment on my calm confidence, the strength in my voice, the way I no longer flinch at subtle manipulations or excuses. I realize that the empowerment isn't in revenge, isn't in proving her wrong, it's in choosing myself, my boundaries, and my peace. The apartment feels lighter now, almost airy, like the weight of her deceit has been lifted. I think about how I could have lost everything if I hadn't acted, how easily my generosity had been exploited. But now, walking through the quiet spaces I fought for, I feel a serene triumph. I didn't have to yell, I didn't have to beg, and I didn't have to stoop to her level. My calm, my strategy, and my patience delivered the closure I needed. And in that stillness, I finally understand, sometimes the loudest revenge isn't confrontation, it's silence, it's patience, it's reclaiming your life piece by piece, and never looking back.